You can see it that it depicts a first-century Hebrew male because the hairstyle was from the first century, and a Hebrew hairstyle, that he was about 6 feet tall, that he was completely scourged all over his body. He was crucified.
Mel Gibson is making a bold claim that has shaken believers and critics alike. He says the world has been lied to about who Jesus Christ really was, and he wants to expose the truth.
The pollens that they found in the cloth were from that region. Also, the weave was a first century. If you look close, you can see that the image of a Tiberius coin marks on the eyes.
So you're saying Jesus historically absolutely did exist.
His words challenge centuries of belief and spark intense controversy. Is this a revelation or a dangerous provocation? What Gibson promises to reveal is stirring emotions and reopening questions many thought were settled. Mel Gibson's bold claim. Hollywood thrives on spectacle. Explosions, car chases, and impossible stunts fill multiplexes every summer. But in the late 1990s, one of the industry's biggest action stars proposed something nobody expected. Mel Gibson wanted to make a film about the final 12 hours of Jesus Christ's life. Not a gentle Sunday school version, not a reverent, soft focus portrayal. He wanted blood, agony, and unflinching brutality. The announcement sent shockwaves through the entertainment industry. Gibson had built his career on adrenaline and charm. He was Martin Riggs in Lethal Weapon, the wise-cracking cop who seemed indestructible. He was William Wallace in Braveheart, screaming for freedom while painted in blue war paint. Now he wanted to show audiences something they had never seen before, crucifixion as it actually happened. Gibson's vision demanded a complete departure from previous biblical films. Earlier Hollywood productions treated the passion narrative with careful restraint. The 1965 film, The Greatest Story Ever Told, featured Max von Sydow as a serene, almost ethereal Jesus. The violence happened mostly off-screen. Audiences were protected from genuine discomfort. Gibson found this approach dishonest. In the first century, Palestine was a brutal place under Roman occupation. Public executions served as warnings to anyone who might challenge imperial authority. Gibson believed that sanitizing this reality betrayed the story's meaning. If audiences could not feel the suffering, how could they understand the sacrifice? This conviction would guide every creative decision he made. As a traditionalist Catholic, Gibson approached the project with religious intensity that alarmed secular Hollywood. He consulted theologians from conservative Catholic institutions. He studied ancient texts and medieval devotional literature. He immersed himself in theological debates about the nature of Christ's suffering that had occupied scholars for centuries. Yet Gibson carried baggage that made many observers uncomfortable. His father, Hutton Gibson, held controversial views that included questioning the Holocaust. Mel had distanced himself from these positions but never fully condemned them publicly. Critics wondered whether the son shared attitudes he refused to explicitly reject. The entertainment industry operates on relationships and reputation. Gibson's personal volatility was well known among insiders. Stories circulated about his behavior on sets and at Hollywood gatherings. His drinking was no secret. The combination of religious fervor and personal instability made studio executives nervous. Major distributors passed on the project. 20th Century Fox said no. Warner Brothers declined. Sony showed no interest. The rejection was unanimous among major studios. Nobody wanted to touch a violent, subtitled religious film in dead languages directed by someone increasingly viewed as unpredictable. Gibson responded by financing the entire production himself. He reportedly invested $30 million of his own money. This was not merely a business decision. It was a declaration of independence from an industry that had rejected his vision. He would make the film exactly as he imagined it, without compromise or corporate interference. Let's tell you what really sits behind Gibson's public promise of truth and how the world would interpret the film's version of history. Fame, addiction, and the breaking point. Success in Hollywood often destroys those who achieve it. The industry offers unlimited access to money, pleasure, and ego gratification. Many who reach the top find themselves unable to handle the reality behind the glamour, and Mel Gibson was no exception to this painful pattern. Fame, wealth, and adulation can mask deep personal struggles, and for Gibson, the pressures of stardom eventually collided with his inner demons. By the mid-1990s, Gibson had achieved everything young actors dream about. He commanded $20 million per film. Directors competed for his involvement, and his face graced magazine covers regularly. Women considered him one of the most attractive men alive. On the surface, he had reached the pinnacle of Hollywood success. Yet the reality behind the image was far darker. Gibson's relationship with alcohol had become increasingly problematic. He could go weeks without drinking and then vanish into binges that lasted days. His mood swings and unpredictable behavior began to affect relationships with family, colleagues, and even studio executives. The charming persona seen in public masked genuine inner turmoil and dissatisfaction. Gibson's early life shaped much of this complexity. Growing up in a family of 11 children had instilled both resilience and a sense of displacement. His father moved the family from New York to Australia when Mel was 12, partly to protect his sons from the Vietnam War draft. The relocation uprooted him from familiar surroundings, creating a sense of instability that followed him into adulthood. Australia offered a different path to stardom, and Gibson embraced it fully. He studied acting at the National Institute of Dramatic Art in Sydney alongside future stars like Judy Davis. His breakthrough came with Mad Max in 1979, a low-budget action film that became an international sensation. Hollywood soon noticed. The transition from the Australian film industry to the American blockbuster system happened quickly. Gibson went from relative obscurity to A-list status within a few years. The Lethal Weapon franchise alone generated over $1 billion, cementing his position as a leading actor of his generation. Each success brought more pressure, scrutiny, and temptation. The adoration of audiences could not fill the emptiness he sometimes felt, nor could it compensate for the personal struggles he faced behind the scenes. In 1980, Gibson married Robin Moore, and together they had 7 children. His Catholic faith prohibited divorce, and he tried to maintain family stability despite the intense demands of his career. Long periods away filming, combined with issues related to substance abuse, created fractures that slowly widened over time. The tension between his public life and private struggles became increasingly apparent, leaving him feeling isolated despite his fame. The decision to step behind the camera came from a desire for greater creative control. Braveheart in 1995 proved Gibson could handle both acting and directing at the highest level. The film won 5 Academy Awards, including Best Picture and Best Director, and critics praised its emotional intensity and visual ambition. Gibson had reached the absolute pinnacle of his profession, yet the satisfaction he expected never arrived. Then came the moment in his life that changed everything. A turning point that would redefine not just his career, but his very understanding of purpose, faith, and personal redemption. The silent awakening and return to faith. Religious conversion rarely happens in dramatic fashion. Lightning bolts, heavenly voices, or sudden revelations make for compelling stories, but they seldom reflect reality. For Mel Gibson, the return to faith came quietly, gradually, and without fanfare. It was less a sudden awakening than a slow thaw after a long spiritual winter, a subtle realignment of his inner life that would eventually reshape everything he created. The Catholic tradition Gibson embraced was not the modernized version that emerged from the Second Vatican Council in the 1960s. He gravitated toward traditionalist communities that preserved older rituals, stricter interpretations, and a disciplined approach to worship. The Latin Mass, with its formal prayers, solemn cadence, and centuries-old structure, appealed to his sense of timelessness. In those rituals, he found a sense of permanence and connection that had been missing from his life amid the transience and excess of Hollywood. His faith also intertwined with specific cultural and political views. Traditionalist Catholics often reject modern innovations in liturgy, theology, and social teaching, maintaining positions on issues like divorce, abortion, and gender roles that diverge from secular values. Gibson made no secret of these convictions, and they inevitably informed his approach to storytelling, emphasizing moral clarity, discipline, and a seriousness often absent from contemporary cinema. This religious framework shaped Gibson's understanding of art itself. Entertainment for its own sake seemed hollow and trivial. Art, in his eyes, should serve higher purposes, pointing toward transcendent truths that secular culture frequently ignores. The Passion narrative offered the ultimate vehicle for this philosophy, combining drama, moral gravity, and spiritual depth in a story with universal significance. Conversations with priests, theologians, and scholars further refined his vision. He discussed historical details with experts in first-century Judaism and Roman occupation, debated theological interpretations with clergy from multiple traditions, and absorbed their guidance into his screenplay. These consultations reinforced his commitment to an unflinching portrayal, while grounding his vision in authentic religious and historical scholarship. Gibson's faith-driven approach took him beyond conventional history and theology, and soon his linguistic choices would become one of the most debated features of the entire production. The book that changed everything. Every film begins with source material. For most biblical adaptations, the Gospels provide that foundation. Gibson certainly drew from Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, studying their accounts closely to ensure scriptural fidelity where possible. But another text proved equally influential, one that most audiences had never heard of, and that scholars regarded with considerable suspicion. This text would come to shape not just the narrative of his film, but its emotional and visual intensity. The Dolorous Passion of our Lord Jesus Christ appeared in print in 1833, compiled by the German Romantic poet Clemens Brentano from conversations with a bedridden nun named Anne Catherine Emmerich. Emmerich claimed to receive vivid visions of Christ's final hours, including details far beyond any biblical account. She reportedly experienced these visions over many years, describing them with extraordinary specificity, from physical suffering to the psychological anguish of those around Jesus. Emmerich spent the last years of her life confined to bed, sustained reportedly only by the Eucharist. She bore wounds resembling stigmata, which drew curious visitors and church investigators who were both fascinated and skeptical. Brentano spent years recording her reported visions, though scholars debate how much of the published text reflects her actual words versus his literary embellishment. The resulting book combines mysticism, devotion, and narrative flourish, creating a work both haunting and compelling. Gibson discovered the Dolorous Passion during his spiritual crisis, and the book proved transformative. The vivid imagery resonated with his vision of what a cinematic passion story required. Abstract theological statements about salvation were insufficient. He needed to see, feel, and convey suffering in concrete, physical terms. Emmerich's visions provided exactly that, offering a template that could translate directly to film. Gibson, however, dismissed such concerns. He was making a film, not writing a dissertation. The emotional truth of Emmerich's account mattered more than academic verification. Her visions offered what the Gospels omitted, sustained attention to the physical and emotional suffering of Christ, which could be translated into visceral, immersive cinema. To translate such brutal imagery into film demanded choices that went far beyond setting and lighting. The entire linguistic canvas had to be built from scratch, recreating the first century with unmatched precision. Language carries culture. The words we speak shape how we think and what we can express. Gibson understood this principle and applied it radically. His film would be spoken entirely in Aramaic, Latin, and Hebrew. English would appear only in subtitles, and even those were initially planned to be absent. Aramaic was the everyday language of Palestinian Jews in the 1st century. Jesus would have spoken it with his disciples, in the marketplace, and during his final conversations. The language survives today in small communities in Syria and among Assyrian Christians scattered by persecution. Most viewers had never heard it spoken. Jim Caviezel, cast as Jesus, faced the most intense challenge. He had to memorize long, complex speeches in Aramaic, a language he did not understand. Delivering the lines with emotional authenticity required immense concentration. Every word, pause, and intonation had to convey grief, pain, or compassion, often in moments of extreme physical exertion during scenes like the scourging or the walk to Calvary. For Caviezel, this was not merely acting, it was an exercise in complete immersion. He had to internalize the character's suffering while speaking in a language that made no intuitive sense to him. By demanding linguistic authenticity, Gibson created performances that were physically taxing, emotionally charged, and deeply immersive. The actor's commitment to learning and speaking Aramaic, Latin, and Hebrew elevated the film, transforming it into an experience that went far beyond conventional storytelling. Their work made the ancient world feel immediate, real, and profoundly affecting, drawing viewers into a story they thought they knew in ways they had never imagined. Medical, archaeological, and historical evidence. Then comes Roman crucifixion, which was designed to maximize suffering and humiliation. The empire used this execution method for slaves, pirates, and enemies of the state. Citizens were exempt from such degradation. The practice continued for centuries until Constantine abolished it in the 4th century after his conversion to Christianity. Historical sources describe crucifixion in general terms, but rarely provide detailed accounts of specific executions. The Jewish historian Josephus mentions mass crucifixions during the Jewish revolt against Rome. Roman writers like Seneca and Cicero reference the practice with obvious disgust, but systematic descriptions of the procedure remain scarce. Archaeological evidence is equally limited. Only one set of crucified remains has been definitively identified, discovered in a Jerusalem tomb in 1968. The bones belong to a man named Jehohanan, who was executed sometime in the 1st century. A nail remained embedded in his heel bone, confirming that nails were indeed used. Gibson consulted medical experts about what crucifixion would do to the human body. The extended scourging that precedes crucifixion in his film would have caused severe blood loss and tissue damage. Victims of such torture often died before reaching the execution site. Those who survived faced hours or days of agony on the cross. The film depicts Jesus carrying the entire cross through Jerusalem's streets. Historical evidence suggests that condemned prisoners usually carried only the horizontal crossbeam. The vertical post remained permanently planted at the execution site. This arrangement was simply more practical for repeat use. Medical professionals who analyzed the film found its depictions physiologically plausible, if historically unverifiable. The wounds shown would produce the blood loss and trauma depicted. Whether actual Roman practice matched this intensity remains unknown. Gibson created a visually convincing nightmare, regardless of precise historical correspondence. Filmmaking, sacrifice, controversy, and global impact. February 25, 2004, changed religious cinema forever. The Passion of the Christ opened in theaters across America after months of controversy, protest, and unprecedented advance publicity. Churches organized group screenings. Critics published preemptive condemnations. The cultural moment was electric with anticipation and anxiety. Newmarket Films, the small distributor that agreed to release the movie, had never handled anything of this magnitude. The company specialized in independent productions with limited commercial expectations. Taking on Gibson's controversial Passion project represented an enormous gamble that could have destroyed the company if it failed. The gamble succeeded beyond anyone's predictions. Opening weekend grossed over $83 million, setting records for an R-rated film. Final domestic receipts exceeded $370 million. International returns pushed the worldwide total past $612 million. On a $30 million budget, The Passion of the Christ became one of the most profitable films ever made. The audience composition surprised industry analysts. Evangelical Christians who rarely attended R-rated movies filled theaters. Churches purchased blocks of tickets and organized transportation. Pastors preached sermons connecting the film to their theological messages. The movie functioned as an evangelistic tool for many congregations. Gibson met with Jewish leaders to discuss their concerns. He made some modifications to the original cut, including removing a subtitle of the crowd shouting that Christ's blood should be on them and their children. These changes did not satisfy all critics, but demonstrated willingness to engage with the controversy. The Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences nominated the film for 3 awards: cinematography, makeup, and original score. It won none. The nominations acknowledged technical achievement, while the losses reflected Hollywood's ambivalence about the project's content and creator. Roger Ebert gave the film 4 stars while acknowledging its extreme nature. He praised its emotional power and visual accomplishment while noting that many viewers would find it unwatchable. Other critics were less generous, accusing Gibson of torture pornography disguised as religious devotion. The film's success transformed the market for faith-based entertainment. Hollywood studios that had long ignored religious audiences suddenly recognized their commercial potential. Films targeting Christian viewers proliferated in subsequent years. The Passion of the Christ proved that sincere religious content could generate mainstream returns. Gibson later released an edited version called The Passion Recut, with reduced violence. This version aimed to reach audiences who wanted the spiritual experience without extreme graphic content. The original theatrical cut remained available and is generally considered definitive. 20 years after its release, The Passion of the Christ remains a reference point for discussions of faith and film. Some consider it a masterpiece that revolutionized religious cinema. Others view it as a troubling example of how devotional sincerity can produce problematic art. The debate continues because the film continues to matter. Gibson's personal trajectory after the film proved complicated. His 2006 arrest for drunk driving included anti-Semitic comments that damaged his reputation severely. His marriage ended after 3 decades. Professional opportunities diminished. The redemption narrative suggested by The Passion of the Christ seemed undermined by subsequent events. Yet the film itself endures independently of its creator's later troubles. Millions of viewers encountered the Passion story through Gibson's vision and were permanently affected by the experience. Whether that effect was spiritually beneficial or culturally harmful depends entirely on perspective. The power itself is undeniable. The story of The Passion of the Christ ultimately concerns the mysterious relationship between personal brokenness and artistic creation. Gibson made his most significant work while struggling with demons he could not fully conquer. What are your thoughts on Mel Gibson's vision for The Passion of the Christ? Did his approach bring the story to life or push it too far? Share your views in the comments.